This is day 4 of the January 92 7-day retreat in Springwater. I wrote down a few questions, not as many as before. One person says, your question list seems to get longer and longer, and the talks are getting shorter. It wasn't put quite that way, but in essence. So it's always some kind of work to bring these questions back up, which are so quickly forgotten, as all of us know things, particularly in a retreat. Are forgotten very quickly, what is said, what is asked. Also, I did receive from the bulletin board 2 letters addressed to me personally, and I'm not reading those. If there's something that a person wants to have discussed, then let me know, or bring it up in a personal meeting. What does it mean to care deeply for someone? When someone says that to me, I am moved somewhat, but it also feels scary. Why? You said that in its essence, approval is empty. What does that mean? And how does that relate to caring for someone deeply? The emptiness of it all. How does it relate to caring for someone? What does it mean to really be close to someone? You said in a meeting that one can see and hear and feel things within and around us simultaneously. How is that possible? When I attend to the breathing, following it, I don't seem to hear the water dripping on the deck. Can one listen to the questions and hear the crow cawing? So the mind isn't just totally focused, but listening attentively and yet open. Feel the sun streaming in, the warmth of the place. The body, the joints bent, the cloth of the pants under the fingers. And also hear the words, without straining to concentrate on any of it, just the openness, the effortless openness of listening. Listening in its natural state, unforced, in order to be a good listener, to catch it all. Do we have to have insight before we can do something meaningful? This question has cropped up, maybe the most during the last 24 hours. I always used to think that way, but now I rather feel that I should do something meaningful for society, or something meaningful with someone else or for someone else, even if there is little or no insight. Can we talk some more about doing something in my life, even though I don't have insight? How do I make decisions to be with someone, to marry, or to stay alone, to have children or not? what job or career to take. How do we arrive at decisions? And there was also this thing coming up in the meeting yesterday. I saw a deer yesterday. I have a little dog myself. I feel love for the animals. It seems easier to love things that seem so vulnerable. The feeling of love and the feeling of being vulnerable seem to be related somehow. How do you see them? The person also mentioned it in seeing a deer and sort of sensing the vulnerability of the creature. It was a felt pain inside. There are these two sort of blocks of questions, one revolving around what does it mean to care for someone deeply? What does it mean to really be close to someone? And why so often for us in being close there comes a fear of being close. And the other one is, do I have to have insight in order to do something? I need to do something. What is right livelihood? Just asked to write an article about that, about right livelihood. And here the question cropping up, can I do anything? There's so much that needs to be done without insight. Or I gotta go ahead and do even if I have no insight. I can't wait all my life to have insight before I do something. Which one shall we take first? Maybe we'll start with the first one. What does it mean to care for someone deeply? To be close to someone, what does it mean? And can we all look as this question is raised? I have no ready answers. I've got to look myself so we can look together. Pool this looking and listening power that's there if we're interested in something. And not be afraid to start at the very surface of it, because this is where we start. That's where we usually are, at the surface of things. What does it mean to care for someone? Do I care for someone because he or she cares for me? Seems almost like magic. Somebody seems to care for me, and immediately one's interest is aroused in that person. I'm not saying this is the only caring. We're starting at the surface, and I may not touch upon all the aspects of it. We all have a pool of aspects here, and one person mentions a few of them. Doesn't mean the others are no good, no valid. That's why we also have discussion and meetings. Do I care for you because I've noticed you care for me? makes me feel good, makes me feel worthy, because you care for me. Makes me feel desirable or wanted. And that feels good. And therefore I want to be in your presence to feel good more. The safety of it, the goodness of it, the pleasure of it. And I'm willing to do things for you because you make me feel good. I know that I have to keep doing something for you, or else you may lose interest in me. You may think, why does she always start with the most selfish way of looking at things? Is it just to put caring down, or is she negative? I'm looking at it right now. And what comes to mind is my own insights when I was a teenager. I think I've mentioned it long ago in a talk. I can mention it again, there are many new people here. At that time during the war, there were practically no young men around. What relationship one had mostly happened either during a brief furlough from the front or in letters. I had met this young man in a concert. Had been to the concert with someone else, and he knew this person, so he got the address and wrote to me. We had one evening together at a concert, and then he was off someplace. Don't remember where. And we wrote letters, and I loved the letter writing. And when the letter arrived, I just skimmed through it to find where does he express that he loves me. That's what I was looking for. The other was secondary. Or if it was very beautifully put, he was a very capable writer, then it was my friend who was so capable. I loved that in relationship to me because he loved me, this capable man. And a letter was much less meaningful to me if there was very little about me in it. I yearned to find myself in his letters. And it dawned on me after a while that I was loving myself through this man, through what he said about me. This was what was important to me, and often what I was writing to him was to elicit more of that. And also do for him so there would be letters coming back. This sounds cold and calculating, and it wasn't calculated, it was how it operated. It didn't all sit down and figure this all out. It happened. But why? I don't know how it happened. I realized, and I can see, it's not so difficult to realize what one is doing when one is interested in finding out about oneself, what moves one, what aches. When a letter wasn't coming, a tremendous pain and yearning for something that was lacking now, being told how much one was loved. So I'm talking from own experience. It's not that I'm judging others. Look for yourself whether there is something true in this, whether this is operating too. Other people have told me about it, that in fact it is. That this surface caring for each other, this surface loving each other. There is needing to feel oneself loved and the good feelings that go with it. Becoming a lovable person. Is there another way of caring for someone? Or is it inescapable, inevitable, that I'm in there needing you to confirm me or to arouse me in my feelings for myself or in my feelings about myself or within myself? Is there another kind of caring for somebody? And one must not jump too quick and say, oh, there must be selfless caring too. Because even in caring for somebody just wrote to me who half a year ago wrote ecstatically caring for an older person, and that was her fulfillment. And now she says, I'm glad the job is over. I couldn't stand her anymore. She is so negative, so demanding, and so on and so on. One can find self-centered motive in oneself without needing to feel guilty about it or put oneself down or be ashamed. That is what we try to like to do here, to find out about ourselves without becoming bad in the process in our own eyes, unworthy. The word self-centered has such negative connotations. I wish we could find a more neutral one, which wouldn't instantly elicit judgment. Because self-centeredness is a fact of life, of human beings. Thinking about oneself and one's own needs and wants and likes and dislikes and fears, being there in relationship with each other. And thinking in terms of those when one thinks about others. One person yesterday in a group meeting said, I have registered for doing some charitable work for hospice. And I thought this came from selflessness. And then when the person told me, I don't need you right now. We don't have a person who is in need of a hospice work. I felt angry. I'd come a long distance to come to this job. Maybe I wasn't needed. I realized what I thought was selfless was very self-centered. And the person didn't seem to say that beating on himself. Just a discovery. And I think the reason that discovery feels so liberating is that we don't carry the dross of imagery about us that we have to constantly water and fertilize and put into the sun. We have no images, we don't have to take care of them. Maintain them, prop them up, build them back up after they've collapsed. And the anxiety that somebody may not see us as a selfless person keeps the body in a constant cramp, conflict. So it was interesting, the person yesterday saying, when you said I care for you, there was some movement inwardly, but also some scariness. Let's look at it from the receiving end first. Somebody is told by someone, I care for you deeply. Well, look later at where the person who says this is coming from, whether it just has to come from this self-center. But if I'm the receiver and someone says, I care for you deeply, and something fearful comes up, scary, and I want the way the person says, I don't want to let you in. Why? Why are we scared about being cared for, liked? Is it precisely because most of the care that we have experienced in our life did come from self-center? It did demand paying back. Did demand being good for that other person so the care would keep coming. And one day, of course, we weren't good for that person, of value to be cared for, or we annoyed the other person, or the other person was not in a mood for caring, and the care didn't come. And everything within, as a probably little baby child or whatever age, everything within craving this now. Craving this touch, this care, this concern, this love. And it wasn't coming forth. And the pain of that, the pain of this, the body needing, every fiber, every tissue, every cell needing at the same time, and nothing happening, out in the cold. At best, nothing happening. At worst, being angrily approached for something. Maybe hit, yelled at. By someone one thought loved one, cared for one. And maybe not once, but repeatedly, over and over. What happens to this organism which vulnerably has stretched out for this care that it had received before and gotten addicted to in a way, not using it in a judgmental way, but needing it again and again? The body becomes addicted in its needs. The energy is of that nature. I remember one person telling me, and we had a lot of meetings, very intimately talking about things, and he said, I remember precisely at the age of 5 when I closed up and died to that little boy who was needy and became very good at math and science and intellect. There had been enough of feeling grief and pain, and shut up the thing, close it down, the whole plant. The death of the 5-year-old boy. It was interesting the way he described it. And something like that has happened in many of us, maybe in all of us. Maybe not to the extent that one doesn't want to let anyone in, but people mention it so much. And why is it that relationships start and are very affectionate, and then all of a sudden it grows apart again? It breaks apart. So, what we're asking is there a different caring for each other? And can this organism, which has been bruised and scarred by previous experience, open up in spite of all the scars of previous experience? And the danger of maybe being hurt again. Living vulnerably. Somebody asking, does vulnerability have something to do with love? We'll leave that open. Living vulnerably, but not closed down and protective, because I might get hurt. Because the closing down usually it grows, and it then pretty soon it covers everything. Everything sensual. You can't really look at something beautiful. Everything becomes dangerous because I may be disappointed, I may be hurt. It's not all spelled out logically, but it's there in the closeness of the senses, of the organism. One doesn't know anymore how it is to live vulnerably open, in touch with whatever may be there, including hurt. To feel hurt, to feel sadness, pain, sorrow, grief, without cringing and hardening up, closing. Is it asking too much of us? It's asking to be alive to it. The other is mechanical. The closing down of the 5-year-old boy, he didn't intend to do that, it happened. The brain has such mechanisms in the rest of the body too. Enough is enough not to feel anymore. Life, what seems to be life-threatening pain. Repression, so on. These are automatic responses. Not to let any more pain-producing stimuli in. And once that has happened, is that irreversible? Does one have to live with this shut-down plant for the rest of one's life? I would never have any such assumption. Because the assumption is more aid to the shutdown. How the body opens up, I don't know. But how does a flower open up when it gets warm enough? Even first come to this frozen ground, the power of life to push through ground. One blade of grass, I once read, pushes against 400 pounds of soil. And then once out, the opening up of a bud, of a flower, to the sun, even though it may be hailing in the afternoon, frost in the evening. Some plants survive it, others don't, but it opens up because it's alive. So now, entering on the other side, what does it mean to care for someone deeply? Or what does it mean to be close, really close to someone? That question also came up in a group. Someone said it means to be in each other's presence without judgment, without not there in order to change the person, criticize the person, have him or her be different for me, but just the way he is, and also not feeling the pressure of needing to be different for this person in order to be cared for. Just being as one is without pretenses, not needing to pretend to be someone special or different. Does closeness flourish in that? Or is that closeness? Maybe we could add to it, not demanding anything. Not even the company of this person. If he or she says, I gotta go now, or I gotta see someone else. How about that? Is there jealousy? Wanting more of this closeness? Or does one care deeply for someone without needing for oneself? When, as long as the company is there, it's warm. There's love in that. That's what the person said. I may even call that love. Being together as one is, no pretense, not demanding of each other change. And then the person leaves. Does one still care for him or her? Even if he or she is now with someone else. That's a tough one. But we're asking, what does it mean to care for someone? Does that include possessiveness, owning the person? I am yours and you are mine. I'm your special one, you're my special one. I think that's more superficial. Superficial meaning there is self-involved and neediness. And we're not saying neediness is bad. We're needy. But is there a caring for someone which does not come out of neediness? And please be careful. I may have asked a question like this before, and that it doesn't just drop into an automatic slot. Here she goes again saying, can one care again for someone without neediness? But look whether it's possible. Not just the words in the sentence say yes or no, or always the same question, but is one on fire or on a tiny ember with this question? Whether there can be care for someone or something or everything, not out of neediness, but out of the love of being alive. Caring for all life, love for all life. Because there is aliveness in this universe, on this earth, in oneself, in each other. And caring for that, caring about that. Caring meaning what? Maybe one can only say what it's not. It's not indifference toward it. Or shutdownness for fear it may hurt. Or defense or resistance. But turning toward it, not to get something, but we turn toward the light. In a state of not neediness, we do turn toward each other. Do we only turn to each other out of neediness? Or do we want to find out about each other, help each other, listen to each other's sorrow or joy or questions? Because we're interested, we care. We're alive, not for a long time. We're here so shortly. It's just a flickering, measured in infinite time. And in this brief flickering of time that we're here, you and I, do we care for each other? And for the snow covering the grasses, and the deer so vulnerable. All the birds there, flying in swarms up and down, they don't hit each other when they rise up in a flock or take off in a flock. The speed, the suddenness, but they don't knock each other. And there's no director there who has rehearsed this for many rehearsals. It's just an organic whole wave that happens. And there's in touchness with the whole thing, the tree, the ground, the air, and all the other birds. And if you're watching it, you're part of that too. Does one care for that? One time, the bird feeder was knocked over by a raccoon. All the sunflower seeds strewn all over. The roof knocked off, and it happened again, I think 2-3 times in a row, and it was summertime, so we decided enough of bird feeding in the summertime, and we stopped it. It was interesting sitting on the stairs there and seeing that bird feed, and hardly a bird there. They were elsewhere. A few were there, but it was different. How does one look at it? With a yearning for having what was so enjoyable to watch? Maybe there. So can one watch the yearning? There's no birds, but there's the yearning to watch. Maybe this is a good way to get out of this topic onto the other. Do I have to have insight before I do something meaningful? Or I feel I've waited long enough for this insight. I've got to do something now with my life. Insight or not? What do we mean by insight? We've talked about it so much now in this connection. Whoever participated in the groups, and it's come up in private meetings. What do we mean, I haven't had insight? Is that just the new cover word for enlightenment? And what goes with this concept of enlightenment? Still the old belief that if I get enlightenment, everything will be clear for me from now on until I die. My life will be sort of straightened out. The crooked made straight. Because this thing happened to me. The relationships will be in order. Actually, well, I shouldn't go into that. It is something like that, isn't it? that thing is still, that program is still there, squeaking around. Like one person said, who has been doing this now since the early 70s, and to the best of her knowledge and feeling has dropped this whole driving for enlightenment. It's been seen for what it does and is, and that it's not significant, this kind of search for this conceptual thing. Saying I felt an ache or tension in my body, and in quietly letting it be and letting it reveal itself, I realized it was the idea I'm not enlightened, or I should get enlightenment. So our programs run very deeply. Programs of heaven and hell run even deeper because they were planted earlier. Very early. Together with praise and blame and survival in the face of approving parents or an approving God or a disapproving parent or God. So what do we mean by insight? That I have to have insight before I can do something? Can one just let go of this sort of chronological thing, first this and then that, cause and effect, sequence of things, and because it isn't like that. In looking at this whole thing right now, there is trying to discover what is going on, and maybe there can be insight into this whole idea of insight, that it is an idea bound up with time, which is also an idea. Nothing happens in time. It's only now that one can see something. This idea of enlightenment that I don't have gave me a pain in the abdomen to see that. And if that's seen, there's a freeing of that. And that goes on for the rest of our life, because there's always something coming up. And there's so many programs that have not revealed themselves, that run so habitually, so subtly. All of a sudden one realizes I've been doing this all my life and never was aware of it. How I'm talking or holding my fork or whatever. And we are doing things all the time with or without questioning, with or without insight. We're doing things either very mechanically, programmatically, habitually, or else there's a sort of a loosening up. We're becoming more aware of what we're doing, what our thoughts are, and how these thoughts affect our feelings. Is that insight? And can that take place at any moment, no matter how involved we were in something angry, or jealous, or fearful? To become aware of that? Not judge it, but noticing the thoughts, how the body manifests these thoughts and the feelings. Maybe no thoughts, just lots of emotion. To become aware of that. Not that it runs like a machine, a program, darkly, dimly. But there's some seeing of it, some awareness of it, some light. That's already changing. We're not functioning the same if there's awareness and if we're doing it mechanically. Everyone has found that out already. I don't have to say it. What about the probably deepest and most influential assumption of ours, that we are a separate being, a separate self, encapsulated from others, from nature, from love, from God, from the world. Is that true? Do we believe that? Do we defend it? We do become defensive if we're very attached to this and somebody talks about or questions it, questions the truth of this. We may become very defensive. Can one become aware of that? The defensiveness of the self. Rather wanting to hear somebody who defends the self, who says it's all right. We all have selves. That's human nature. Live with it. Make the best of it. It's up to each one of us. To me, personally, it was a question very early before I got into this whole Zen thing. Because the feeling of separation, of encapsulation, was so painful, so meaningless, that all of life seemed meaningless. And the way we lived in warfare and persecution of each other. So there was no resolution. I got to find out about the self. There was no choice but to find out about it. Everything beckoned to be examined freshly, and not knowing how. So what I did is first go to school. The answers didn't quite come, although there were interesting things there. Interesting things in psychology, sociology, anthropology, everything was interesting, but it didn't satisfy the hunger to really find out what this meaning was, what oneself was, what our relationship means. what death means, dying, the fear of that. Because it became clear too that with this feeling of separation goes hand in hand the feeling of unworth, insufficiency, lack, and fear. Yearning for being united in fear of being abandoned, which is already probably the first yearnings and fears in the new baby. I often thought of that as a child. My parents told us, my mother told us very early that we came out of her belly. She wasn't going to have any kind of story for us. And that impressed me deeply. What also impressed me was that I didn't know about how come I didn't feel that. I would have liked to feel that. And those thoughts usually came to me in our little bathroom. It was a little tiny, narrow, sort of like a little hallway bathroom. I like to be in there. Close the door and be there and think about having come out of her belly. Sometimes I looked in the toilet whether I had produced a baby. But the other thought that was there too was, what if I was still in a bigger womb now and would be born out of that? And this time, by gum, I was going to be aware of that. I was going to notice that. Not miss this event. Who knows? Do we know where we are? And I don't mean to start building fantasies about this, because that's what the mind does, and then it takes refuge in those. But just wondering and realizing that we don't know. There's so much joy in that, because then there are infinite possibilities for something to happen that we would never have dreamt of, or that we don't know, and that can be witnessed or seen directly. So, we started saying, out of the feeling of separateness, inevitably evolve or go hand in hand simultaneously. With it goes fear, insufficiency, unfulfillment, and a yearning for fulfillment, for wholeness, for unity or meaning or sufficiency, lack of lack, absence of lack. And is that where our desire for a livelihood comes from? Out of that push, that drive from this feeling of separateness? That's a good question, isn't it? And if it comes out of that feeling of lack, insufficiency, fear of abandonment and separation, fear of not being good enough, of lacking, if our drive for livelihood, for money, for fame, position, possessions, serving others, being a spiritual being, enlightenment, if that comes out of this feeling of separation, it cannot heal that, can it? As long as that persists and there has not been a depth of understanding that this is not true. We're not separate, even though there are different bodies here. One body may have a certain sickness, another body doesn't have that sickness. But that doesn't make me separate from you. It doesn't make me feel separate from you, because you have a sickness and I don't. Or if I have a sickness, do I feel separate? I may if the thoughts revolve that way. Thoughts create that feeling of separation freshly all the time with new incidents. Oh, I'm so poor, I'm such a victim, I'm so good, I'm so special. Thought can do it in a jiffy. So, if the feeling, the false belief in separation, I'm saying that, I'm making that statement, you can attack it, but I'm standing on it. I've seen it to be false. If that is not understood to be false, then all of our trying to make up for it, to compensate for it in our profession, our career, our job, our relationship will come to naught because this hasn't been resolved. It's there, aching and festering, and always ready to break out in a new wave of pain or fear, despair. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that we can't do things. We do things all the time, but is this resolved or is this understood? The jobs, the relationship, the money cannot resolve a false idea. A false idea has to be seen to be a false idea. And I understand, it's more than an idea. It's a deep-seated program which has shaped our whole personality. Maybe this whole thing doesn't even have to be resolved because it's not true. It just has to be seen that we're not separate. And then whatever we do doesn't matter so much because the driving generator is not there to fulfill, to compensate, to make whole, because we are whole. We are all one, a whole family, not just human beings, including everything, the deer and the birds and the stars and stardust, whatever that is. Then whatever I do in this little corner, it affects everyone. Maybe like just a snowflake dripping on a big, huge pile of snow. It doesn't matter quantity, but it's inevitable that whatever you and I do affects the whole if we are this whole. And to me there is no doubt about this. And that's why it doesn't matter so much what it is one does, but if one finds a thing that is to one's capabilities and talents and liking, it's good. But it's not any more significant as far as this whole humanity and consciousness is concerned as even if one stays home as a so-called housewife, takes care of the house and the children or child and has a close relationship with the neighbor or the friends that come. Close in the sense we were talking about before. Because if we can't relate closely, what good is our well-sounding career? If we can't relate, you and I, closely, meaning being there in each other's presence without demanding things for ourselves. For that aching, lonely island. I wonder how much confusion this talk has generated. Or misunderstanding, but we can pick it up. It's nice to laugh, not to take it too seriously. I'm not a perfect expresser of things. One person told me this morning, these days I would express things differently than you do. And please do. I also need new expressions. Maybe I can learn from you. And seeing what we are can happen anytime, any place. It doesn't have to be in a bright, empty sitting room. And it can be forgotten anytime, including a bright, empty sitting room. That the curtain closes so quickly, and then it's forgotten, but it can be seen again. And again and again. That's why when people ask me, how long does this work take? I say, your whole life, my whole life. There's no time limit on this. Because one moment of forgetting or inattention and the programs kick in. Mechanically, and the main program is I'm separate, me only, or me first. It's not said with blame, it's a fact. And if it opens up, one sees how unimportant or how confining this attachment to this idea of me is. And then there's an airiness, a freedom from it, for that moment of clarity. See, when we say, what am I going to do with my life? Already the expression sounds so fragmented. It's not my life, and I'm doing something with my life. It's being alive. How are we alive? Let's look. This moment of aliveness. Am I doing something with it? Or in the aliveness, action happens? Or the aliveness is already action? We will end here for today.